Hello and welcome. I am your host, Goblin Kwain, and tonight I'm going to play an interview I did with Timothy Renner, where we talk about Bigfoot, which is Tim's area of expertise and interest. And in his research and writings, he shines light on some of the more ethereal and highly strange qualities of Sasquatch. We talk about the basics of Bigfoot's belief and lore. Then we move into some of the more unusual aspects that have been noticed by Tim and his co-author and others as patterns in sightings. So this episode consists mostly of our talk, although there are a couple of readings of personal experiences that I throw in. So if you prefer my usual format of me reading paranormal accounts and commenting on them, then I'll catch you in the next one. And appreciate you tuning in. For anyone who is interested, let's get started. Hello and welcome. I am your host for the evening, Goblin Kwain, and tonight, Tim Renner's in the house. What's up, Tim? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome.
I would like a Fae title as well.
Okay.
Can I be a knight of some sort? Can I be a...
Yeah. Well, you're very wizardy, though.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
So we'll have to think of something.
Okay. But you, as the Goblin Queen, could bestow the title upon me.
I see. All right. We'll get that cooking.
All right.
So, Tim is the host of the Strange Familiars podcast and a very talented author, artist, and musician. Tim, is it true that you have an interest in Bigfoot?
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. That's fair to say.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about tonight. You've written several books, something you talk about in your podcast, you talk about on other podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know, just to get started, how and when did your interest in Bigfoot begin?
When I was a wee little feller, I grew up in what I call the golden age of Bigfoot. So the Patterson-Gimlin film was filmed in, I think, was it 67? I'm not great with dates. A couple years before I was born. I'm born in 70, and then Legend of Boggy Creek comes out in the early 70s. In Search Of starts coming on TV. They're doing shows on Bigfoot. It really was this like golden age of Bigfoot. He was on, they had like Bigfoot and Wild Boy, the $6 Million Man show. He was, had Bigfoot on there. It was really, just had a pop culture moment and a moment in general. I think we could talk about the way these things cycle as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's definitely had a resurgence, huh?
Yeah. It seems like it's aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, they kind of have waves.
Mm-hmm.
But I was fascinated as a kid. And the strange thing is I ran through the woods. I grew up on a farm, surrounded by woods. And I would run through the woods almost daily without fear by myself. I had a very protective dog that was with me all the time. But I didn't think about Bigfoot. Bigfoot was in California and Oregon. There were a couple local stories I remember as a kid. But in general, I remember like, that's dumb. Bigfoot's a California guy. He's on the West Coast. He's in, Oregon and Washington. Not knowing at the time how many sightings are actually all over the country and in the East Coast. But I was really fascinated with that. Despite having seen a UFO when I was a kid and having these other experiences, you think that would push me towards the UFOs, but it was a cool thing to see. I was like 8 or so. My mom, called me outside. You want to see a UFO? It was really cool. And I spent a long time looking at it, but I didn't then develop this fascination with UFOs the way I was with Bigfoot. I would get over and over again. I would get this Bigfoot book. I think we had 1 or 2 in the school library. Just every time I would get it out to the point where I remember they said, you have to put that back and let somebody else have a chance for it. And no one else would take it out. And I would, wait a week or skip a week or 2 and I'd get it again. And just completely fascinated with it. Absolutely fascinated with it. And that faded, when I was a teenager, found punk rock and girls and all the things. And eventually I get married and have kids. And one day I'm on the internet and I'm like, oh, Bigfoot. I remember Bigfoot. And I sort of typed in. And yeah, the phenomenon didn't stop. I just stopped following it. And the whole world opened up. And I gradually started getting more and more interested from there.
What kind of dog did you have that followed you around the woods?
He was literally half collie, half German Shepherd, but he presented almost entirely as a collie.
Oh.
But he was a smart guy. I've done an entire podcast on him with there's a friend of mine does a podcast. She's a dog trainer. I did a whole podcast on Barney. His name was Barney.
Oh, Barney. Collies are so pretty.
He was my best friend. There was no one my age out in that neighborhood in the farm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just me and my older brothers and sister. They didn't want to play with me. I'm the youngest. They didn't want me hanging around them. So it was just me and the dog, and it was a good time.
Yeah, I don't have a dog anymore. I have cats now, but I used to have a dog, and she was my hiking buddy. That was our thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you said you saw a UFO, which I've heard you tell that story. That's more or less it, right? Your mom called you out to see a UFO.
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe missing time with it in as much as, so my one brother and sister were out there and my mom, and they all decided to go in because it was just literally hovering above the trees in the landscape kind of there. And I was just fascinated. I stayed out to watch it, which sounds weird because I'm 8 years old, but again, had this super protective dog, and it wasn't unusual for me on the farm. I just kind of had the run of the farm, but I don't remember going inside. The next thing I remember was being inside and looking at the UFO in the same place, but from a window. Now, many years have gone by. I don't know if that's missing time or just, a bad memory.
What did it look like?
It was your typical disc, and it had lights that seemed to be going around the middle of it. Different colored lights, to my recollection, like green, blue, red, maybe white, I forget. But I just remember colored lights just going around the center of this object that was just in the sky for, I don't know, an hour or more.
And yeah, so you said it's kind of weird that maybe you didn't latch on to UFOs after that, but you come off as a very unearthly guy, nature lover, and if we're going with aliens are a part of a outer space, I guess that's nature in its own way too, but you're very much like a woods earth person, I think.
Right. Yeah. Now, this is the time of Star Wars, and I certainly watched those movies and enjoyed them. But for me, it was like I was like the Dungeons and Dragons kid, right? Give me that sort of earthier thing. So yeah, I can see. And while I don't, at this point in my career as a paranormalist or whatever I am, think that those are little men and little scientists from other planets up there. As a kid, that's definitely what I would have thought. And it would have been more of a sort of a science fiction thing to me. And I would have been like, oh, that's cool. But, let me get out in the woods.
Yeah. So I think it fits with your personality that you went to Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm relatively new to Bigfoot. I only started having an interest in the last probably 2 years. I've learned a lot listening to your show and reading your books, but I do want to put a base down for people who may not know anything about Bigfoot and work our way up to the weirder aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of working backwards.
Right.
My interest was sparked by the high strangeness you talk about in a lot of your research. And now I'm working my way back through the basics, which I find interesting too. So we're going to deviate a little bit from my normal format, which is just going through stories and me commenting on them. Kind of just going to talk about Bigfoot. I do have some accounts we might reference, but a couple of reasons why my interest was never piqued. One, I think, is because I'm from the suburbs, like a very densely populated area. And so there wasn't, I don't know, but I love nature and I found it where I can. Mm-hmm. Just a little park or a little woods behind my house. But I don't know, Bigfoot definitely wasn't a part of the culture here. And also just the culture surrounding Bigfoot that I was exposed to, I was really turned off by, like kind of this Americana, like hunting guy that you see on TV. I found it really silly and very masculine. So there's still part of that, right?
Oh, that's a huge part of the Bigfoot world. I mean, there's some contention. I guess it goes both ways. We'll say it goes, I'm trying to be as kind as I can, but in general, those folks are flesh and blood people. They believe it is a flesh and blood creature. And I try to be as kind as I can because I think that is probably a logical place to start with this. But I also believe that if you ignore all the information that points to it being weird you're not being honest about the phenomenon. Eventually, these flesh and blood people have to start doing that because there's so much weirdness with it. And at that point, they're not being honest.
Yeah, and we'll get into that and we'll kind of explain to people what the flesh and blood hypothesis is, because it's kind of just the mainstream theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of, we mentioned earlier Bigfoot coming back around, I mean, or just not even coming back around, just kind of really being a really, really popular image. I see all the time, like bumper stickers of Bigfoot, like wearing sometimes like flannel,
Oh, yeah.
red flannel and a shotgun on coffee and beer, all these products.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Carrying different flags.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor Bigfoot is getting politicized.
Mm-hmm.
So, for Bigfoot basics, the very, very basics, I don't know if this would happen. You can tell me if it has in the context of anyone other than like a child. But if someone said, Bigfoot, what is that? I've never heard of that. What would you say? Like, how would you explain that to someone?
I would say it is a wild man, and that all cultures all over the world have wild men. And they usually live right outside of town. And this can be in the desert, it can be in the jungle, it can be in the mountains. You name it. I haven't found a culture yet that doesn't have some form of wild man. And I would simply say that Bigfoot is our wild man.
Cool. Yeah, I was going to get to wild men, but we'll definitely circle back to it. But just laying the base, can you kind of tell us really briefly what wild man is and the long history that has?
Yeah, and it has taken many forms. And I'm really not super up on the folklore everywhere in the world. But as far as like European folklore and some of the American folklore, it's attributed in different ways. And the wild man changes too. And we might want to save this as we get into the weirder part. But generally, it's an archetype. And so if you know how Jung talks about archetypes, it's like the mother, the father, this and that. And the wild man is one of these. The trickster is a big one that you'll hear people in the paranormal reference. So it tends to be one of these archetypes. But people have written legends about it for years and years. And my belief on folklore, and I say this all the time, is that it's not fiction. Folklore, through whispering down the lanes, thing gets exaggerated. And I think sometimes somebody sees something, maybe big and hairy, and they saw something that was 8 foot, and by 200 years later, it's 20 foot tall and becomes this giant. But I think the essential truth is there in the folklore, and it's teaching. And what it is our ancestors teaching us how they dealt with this stuff. And as someone who's a traditional ballad singer as well, there's a saying in the ballad world that's bad songs don't become traditional. There's a couple I would argue about that. That's just my personal preference. But in general, it's true. Bad songs don't get, and as far as folklore, I think like bad information doesn't get to become folklore usually. It teaches us, hey, that berry, don't eat that berry. Don't go to that river and stand by the bank alone. Don't follow the lights in the woods at night, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of this folklore about wild men. Is it, just like fairies? Oh, were they making things up? No, these were things people were seeing. And this is one of them. And again, it manifests. So for people post 1880 or so, once the Europeans and the Americans become aware of the mountain gorilla in Africa, we start assigning this gorilla-like quality to it because it's big and hairy and it's in the woods. Before then, it was always called a wild man. I mean, there might be localized names for it, but generally it was a wild man. And it was a hairy man in the woods, sometimes partially clothed, almost never fully clothed, sometimes with rags of clothes, sometimes using tools, sometimes not, sometimes using fire, sometimes not. Again, after we become aware of the mountain gorilla, all that begins to change, and there may in fact be reasons for that, which we can get into as we get into the weirder aspect of this.
Yeah, folklore, I agree. I think it almost always stems from personal experiences that people have had, whether all of them are really what, maybe some of it's like misidentification or something, but becomes a story, and the stuff that sticks around is things that resonate with people.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely come back to the wild man, but good to lay down that foundation. So Bigfoot, some of the things that they're known for, like, is it lithoboly? Is that how you say that?
Yeah, rock throwing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things I've done is I've collected these old newspaper articles going back to the very early 1800s. There are some from the 1700s that are in books I've yet to publish, but
Your first two books are like that format, right? On Bigfoot, rather.
Bigfoot in Pennsylvania and West Coast Wildmen, Bigfoot West Coast Wildmen are basically old newspaper articles I put together. And they talk about these things: throwing rocks, dislike for dogs, very strange one, climbing on roofs. And I still get reports today. Often people who like live in trailers. Now, I used to work telephone work, and I would have to get up on top of these trailers and wire them sometimes. And my weight will dent in the top of a trailer. But yet these people are saying this giant creature is getting on top of their roof and they can hear it running around and it's not leaving any marks. People with slate roofs telling me this thing's running across their roof. Well, that would shatter the slate tiles, you know?
It'd be loud too.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Anyway, that gets into the evidence part of it, but they attribute them to climbing on top of roofs. Recognizing what firearms are. They seem to know and they don't like it. They seem to have a sort of a culture of revenge. In other words, if somebody does take a shot at it, like a hunter, and they walk back to their house, they can expect trouble at their house from that point. It will, bang on the side of their wall at night and harass them, maybe kill their pets even. It can get that extreme. But these things, people were reporting on modern shows like Sasquatch Chronicles I was listening to, right? These kind of activities. And I go back and get these articles from 200 years ago, and they're saying the same things about these wild men, what they're calling wild men. They didn't call him Bigfoot back then. They call him wild men. They're saying that he's doing these things, are doing the same thing. Interest in children. They show a disturbing interest in children, sometimes beckoning them, sometimes grabbing them up and running with them. There's a horrifying story in Bigfoot in Pennsylvania about a wild woman who grabbed a little girl and her parents had to chase it down. I think it eventually dropped it and they got her back, but it's like, how scary is that? This thing, grabs your child and is leaping over fences and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has all these sort of details and mainstream science. And here's the thing. I have to bounce back and forth between arguing against mainstream science and using the arguing points of mainstream science to debunk the flesh and blood Bigfoot. I'm in a very strange position, but I'm not trying to appeal to mainstream science. I firmly believe that mainstream science will never accept this phenomenon, and it's pointless to try. The flesh and blood people, however, are desperately trying to prove it to mainstream science because, I'll show them and I'm right then. I don't know what the motive is.
Yeah, validation.
It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. But in any case, science hates witness testimony. Absolutely hates it. It's very fallible. If you can't do it in the lab, they don't want it. They don't want it. But I say if witness testimony, if we're talking about the testimony of hundreds of witnesses over hundreds of years, and they're all talking about the same odd behavior, not just, it hunts and it kills deer. No, odd behaviors, climbing on roofs, like I said, all this strange stuff that it's doing. That says something to me, because these people that were listening to Sasquatch Chronicles and going on Sasquatch Chronicles and telling their stories, I am sure they weren't going back and doing this newspaper research and saying, what did people say about these wild men in 1820? Let me say the same thing now. No, until my books were published, and there were a couple before me, but really, until these books were published, they weren't doing it. These articles weren't out there, and I had to search hard. It's not easy to find. If you do this newspaper searches, you'll turn up 15 stories about a mountain man that walked into town that, anybody with long hair and a beard back then was like, it's a wild man, So you had to kind of filter through those stories where they were actual humans and pick out the ones where it seems like they're talking about something very, very strange. So in any case, all of these accounts over hundreds of years to me says like, oh yeah, people are seeing something. We're talking about something that people are seeing here for sure.
Right. Another one is structures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go over those a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how far back those go. So these tree structures, which people call them stick structures, they tend to appear in places where people encounter Bigfoot. I don't remember people talking about this when I was a kid and into it. That doesn't mean it wasn't happening. It very well could have been. Got a new guest host. Yeah,
this is Boo Radley.
So they may have been happening. I just might not have been aware of them. But it seems at least in more recent times, and again, in these old reports, I can't think of a time I dug up a story before. There's one that's kind of talks about these odd stick structures, I think from the 50s. But really, I think that's the only one. And it's really not talking about them in the same way that we see them today. These sort of teepees and they're woven together and they seem to take these same forms rather, these different structures. You see them again and again. This was sort of like this guy was talking about grids of sticks woven together and stuff. But in any case, I don't find many old reports of them, but it seems to be there are a lot now. Now, did people just start documenting them and noticing them, or what? Or are they a new part of the phenomenon? I don't know.
Do they look like dwelling structures?
So, yeah, this is the thing. Like, for years, flesh and blood people said they were hunting blinds.
Mm.
And the ones I've found, and anyone I've ever seen pictures of, they are piss poor hunting blinds because you can see right through them. They're not hiding anything. They might break up the form of something, I guess, maybe, but it just seems, I'm just going to say no. Because they're not like right beside game trails or anything usually. They're usually like off by themselves. They've said I've heard people say, flesh and blood people, they're like cribs for the baby Sasquatch. How do you know? How do you know this? They build these, I call them Rube Goldberg devices. They kind of build these devices and work backwards to make this stuff work as a flesh and blood animal. My theory was for a long time that they were somehow magical things, like three-dimensional sigils, or maybe even altars or fetishes. I have changed that recently because of the number of structures I've found in places where people have had previous encounters with these things. Again, I don't know, but my current working theory is maybe encountering us is as important to these things as it is when we encounter it to us. And it's marking places where it had encounters with humans. And then again, just a working theory. I could absolutely be wrong.
It's like a physical imprint of an experience. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then vocalizations are important too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've had everything from screams, whoops, speech, of which two types. You got this, what they call the samurai chatter. If you've ever heard the Sierra sounds.
Yeah, I have.
Everyone should go listen. They're on YouTube. They're incredible.
I have to tell you. So real quick, let's talk about the Sierra sounds because it's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it Ron Moorhead, the researcher who?
Yes.
So it's just, and were all those taken at once? Was it just like one?
No.
Okay.
No, they were recorded over several visits.
Okay. So him and one other man, right, are in,
Mm-hmm.
Where are they in the Sierra Nevadas?
Well, there was a group of hunters that went up there. They had a little hunting cabin way up in the mountains in the Sierras.
Okay. And yeah, basically they just record all these different vocalizations. I have to tell you, those freak me out. They really creep me out.
They are super creepy.
They are.
Super creepy.
One sounds like, it's weird. It's like almost this rapid fire of different vocalizations, but it's thrown in there like a woman like screaming, like really spooky. And the samurai chatter I find really unnerving. I don't know why.
So a language expert from the Navy who had no interest in Bigfoot previous to this was looking to do a project with his son. And he said, let's look up Bigfoot sounds for his son. Some school project he's doing with this. And this guy was an expert. He's a crypto-linguist. So it's his job to listen to different languages and figure out, is it a real language? Is it something someone's making up to throw off, for spy stuff and, security stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So he's on the internet and he's looking up Bigfoot sounds. He comes across the Sierra sounds and he's listening to it and he's absolutely fascinated by it. And he said there are language phonemes in this. It is a language being spoken. He cannot tell what's being spoken, but he can tell it's absolutely a language being spoken. So it's no language on the planet Earth. But he says, again, this guy's a previously not interested in Bigfoot at all. This got him very interested. But he said whatever's happening there is a language being spoken. Really incredible. It sends chills up your spine.
It does.
But yeah, recorded in the Sierras. A whole different range of vocalizations. It sounds at times like arguing, like two voices arguing, and like it's really aggressive sometimes.
It sounds like they're responding. They're like calling back and forth, right? Ron, the researchers, and to the.
Well, one time Ron went out there and he started imitating them,
yeah.
And they're sort of calling back and forth and doing the same sounds. Yeah.
And the reason it's called samurai chatter is because it sounds kind of like a Asiatic language.
So like these old samurai movies, I think they were basing on I've heard some people say that's a problematic name to give it. I understand that, but that's sort of the common name that's used. So very, very strange, very cool. These sounds are incredible. Sometimes, though, it's speaking English or other known languages, Native American language, Spanish. And again, this is something with which the flesh and blood people really wrestle because they have said, because of this and because of these other strange sounds that pop up around Bigfoot, which don't seem to be vocalizations, they say that Bigfoot are this incredible mimic, that they can mimic everything perfectly. From the sounds of tractors and forklifts and trucks backing up to other animals to human vocals. But the vocals they're choosing to mimic are very particular, often the names of people's pets they're calling, or the names of people themselves that live in these places that they are frequently visiting. Very strange that they're only choosing to mimic that.
Yeah, I have a story I might read later if we have time that there's a really weird sound. It's a really strange sound that it makes. But then a lot of people with the mimicking, I've heard people on your show say that they hear an owl in the woods, but they know that it's not an owl. It sounds like something doing an owl call.
In one of our episodes, we were at a place called Pandemonium. I recorded an owl that you can hear one owl going, and then there's another owl that's like a half octave lower than that owl. And that was recorded while we were having something walk around our campsite.
So I wanted to go over those characteristics because maybe you could lay out for us.
Mm-hmm.
So with UFO encounters, there's these close encounter rankings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Close encounter, the fourth kind, is where it's the most involved, one-on-one basically with an entity. And there's something similar for Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
What is it called, like class A through C or something?
I think so. I think I forget how they break them down. And this is, so the BFRO is the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. They're the big guys, Finding Bigfoot. If people remember that show, that was them. They're sort of like the first big Bigfoot. Now they are very hardcore flesh and blood. They insist this is an animal that they're going to find someday. But they came up with these classifications. And I know Class A is like you get a definite sighting. You see it clearly. Class B is you get this Bigfoot-like phenomenon. You hear it, maybe a bad smell, maybe a rock gets thrown at you, things like that. I forget what Class C is. Maybe that's just a distant howl or something you hear. I forget. But the Class B, the very interesting thing is the Class B experience is a one-to-one comparison to poltergeist phenomenon. 1-to-1. There's not even, you don't have to juggle things. It's bad smells you get in poltergeist phenomena. Unknown language, much like the Sierra sounds, you get in poltergeist encounters. Stones being thrown inside of people's houses in poltergeist encounters. People pick them up and they're warm inside their house. Now, in the woods, people pick them up after they get these thrown. Oh, Bigfoot was holding it and he made it warm. It's the same thing, poltergeist encounters. 1-to-1, there's no difference.
If he whips it through the air, I don't think it's going to be warm anymore.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's they got to explain this stuff. So the Class B Bigfoot experience, and that is what really woke me up. Again, I think it's fairly natural to start in a flesh and blood place. And I always say, I never blame hunters in the woods. He's in a tree stand. He sees one of these things walk underneath his tree stand. Somebody's driving in a car. They see it walk across the road in front of them. I never blame them because to them, they saw an animal. They saw a real creature, something physical. So I don't blame them for starting and saying, oh yeah, no, this definitely, they're real and they're animals and they're out there. I don't blame them for that. But that's where you start. And then you go from there and you pick up all this weird stuff. Again, like the Class B phenomenon being a 1-to-1 comparison with poltergeist phenomenon. Does that not get anyone, that shook me out of it right away. I was like, okay, something's very odd here. I mean, I knew there was before that. Even in my very first book, I leaned towards more the flesh and blood thing. But even in there, I was like, yeah, but there's something really weird about this. There's something very, very strange about this. And from there, I just kind of more and more started thinking about it. And again, whenever you want to break out of the flesh and blood thing, and I can get into the reasons why.
Yeah, one thing we didn't mention, was the smell. Is that a lot of the times people report this really powerful smell that's usually like either really bad, like body odor or a sulfur smell or kind of like decaying matter.
Rotten meat. Yeah.
But really strong, and then you never come across it. And sometimes it's like very localized smell.
Yes, I had one time what we called the wall of stink. We were on a trail and we could literally walk into it and about 2 feet, you're out of it and you can't smell it anymore. And you turn back around and you walk back into it and you smell it again. Walk 2 feet to the other side, you don't smell it. Weird. Like, I don't know that smells should work like that. And Chad, my buddy, investigation partner, years later, around the same place, not in exactly the same place, but around the same place, had the same thing happen to him. He said it was weird. It's like a 2 foot wall. You could walk into it, smell this nasty smell, and walk right out of it.
Before we jump into the weirdness, I am curious, how much do descriptions, because when we get into the weirdness, I mean, the descriptions vary quite a lot, but how much do descriptions vary as far as like standard fare reports go?
A great deal.
Yeah.
To the point where it's very common for people to talk about type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4 Bigfoot. And again, this is not something I've memorized, but generally I'm not sure which type is which, but there's the Patty type. So if people are familiar with the Patterson-Gimlin film, the big, hairy.
Right. That's that old footage that everyone has seen.
Yeah.
Of a chunky Bigfoot walking across the screen.
Yeah. When the creature's walking across the screen and looks back at the camera and keeps on walking. So that's what they call the Patty type. I believe they call that type 1, but I forget. Again, these are the different types. I'm not sure which type corresponds to which number. People see something that looks like a caveman, like a Neanderthal, that's way more man-like than ape-like. They see things that look like giant chimpanzees, very kind of monkey-like. Some of these things have a snout, which leads, it's Dogman. Don't even get me into that.
We can't get into Dogman tonight.
Yeah. Again, snout without the pointed ears and no hocked legs. So, normal sort of humanoid legs, but having a snout. That's another type. I'm probably leaving one out. Mm-hmm. So, but okay. There you go. There's these, and people are seeing this great variety all across the country. And again, the flesh and blood people have tried to say, well, the Patty type is in California. The chimpanzee type is down south. The Neanderthal type is on the East Coast. Not true. These different types are seen all over the place in all these different areas. So now we're talking about a species that has these different looks manifesting everywhere. It gets to be mind-boggling. So yeah, there's a great variety of what people are reporting looks-wise.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I became more familiar with the kind of research you're doing that there was a flesh and blood hypothesis, which a lot of people probably don't know that with UFOs, there's people like you and I are both say like the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And it basically...
Or the nuts and bolts hypothesis.
Yes. Basically deviates from the mainstream idea that in the case of UFOs that aliens or extraterrestrials are actually extraterrestrial and they're not something else, just something either from Earth or from within on a subconscious level. So with Bigfoot, the flesh and blood hypothesis is that it's a physical being.
It's a physical animal that they're gonna catch one day. For years, it was a form of gorilla. That didn't work for them. They changed it to be some form of Gigantopithecus. And now I think the going term is a relict hominid of some sort because of its intelligence and its very human-like nature. So that now it's the trend to call it a relict hominid.
People don't say missing link anymore, do they?
No, but I think that's sort of the push, but again, a lot of your flesh and blood crowd would also happen to be Venn diagram people who don't believe in evolution. There's some crossover in that Venn diagram.
I see. So basically, yeah, when it comes to evidence, this is where we can kind of pivot because it's no secret that there's no concrete, indisputable evidence of Bigfoot. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this discussion right now.
Right.
I mean, there's things like finding footprints and finding hair and hearing things, shoddy video and stuff.
Yeah.
And yet sightings continue.
Sightings continue. And before I get into all of this, and again, I argue like a skeptic for this. I believe people. I've talked to people. Look, I go out there. I've experienced some very strange things, seen some very strange things, smelled and heard some very strange things. I am a believer. I do not, however, believe it's a flesh and blood creature that we can put in a cage. It's just, that's where it ends for me. We do have evidence. We have wonderful footprints, wonderful footprints that experts in primate locomotion look at and they say, oh my gosh, they look at these casts rather. And they say, you'd have to be an expert in primate locomotion, like me, who's gone to school for umpteen years to fake this. Because there's sort of sometimes they'll come up with like foot injuries and stuff in these casts that just no one would know. Like your average Joe wouldn't know to put that in, to make a fake one with a foot injury like that. And they have these like dermal ridges and stuff that are nearly impossible to fake in these casts. So yeah, they're incredible, but all we have are casts. And I always put it in terms of like relics of saints, for instance. And I just use this as a sort of an example. You have first class relics. And these are parts of the saint or something the saint actually owns, their clothing or something. But usually it's their hair, maybe a bone from the saint, a tooth, something like that. Second class relics are things, first class is part of the body. Second class would be something they owned or something they touched, something that was very close to them. And then a third class relic is one that's touched to another relic and becomes a relic that way. So in terms of relics, we have no first-class relics of Bigfoot. Yes, people have claimed to have scat. They've claimed to get hair. They've claimed to get DNA. We can talk about all that. All of it is inconclusive. All of it is inconclusive. Now, these footprints, these casts of footprints that these experts look at and say, oh, yeah, something real left that footprint. That's all the further they can go. And many of them, that's all the further they will go. You have folks like Jeff Meldrum. I always say I will not debate him or question his authority on primate locomotion and primate foot structure and all that. He knows more than I could learn if I spent the rest of my life trying to do that. But he doesn't know anything about Bigfoot. Like, he knows about footprints. That's what he knows about. And he can look at those footprints and say, yeah, that's a great footprint, and this is why it's real, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Fantastic. How did they hunt ghosts in the 1950s? They put powder on the floor, and they waited for footprints to appear. Bigfoot people are doing the same thing in the woods with mud. They won't realize it. So we have these great footprints. They do not account for the fact that often these 2-mile trackways of footprints will end in the middle of a field. They just stop. And so the flesh and blood people have to say, well, it turned around and walked in its own footprint. I think it's the most humorous thing you can imagine. This 8-foot tall, 450-pound monster, so scared that it's leaving footprints that it turns around and tiptoes back through its footprints. So he doesn't mess up the tracks. He has to tiptoe back through, which, by the way, impossible. It would mess up the tracks. But tiptoes back through in order, why? So we won't follow him. Come on. This thing's supposed to be an apex predator. It could rip your arms out of your body and throw you. You'd literally pick you up and throw you through a goalpost. Come on. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, I collected hair. Every bit of hair. Tested once. It might come back as unknown animal, unknown primate, something like that. They send it to another lab to test. Comes back as human. Comes back as bear. Comes back as coyote. DNA evidence. There was a major study done. And the woman who did it, and I'm sorry I'm blanking on her name, but she did a major study on it. And she said that it's completely novel DNA. That the matriarchal side is human female and the paternal side is completely novel. She called it angel DNA. Okay. Nothing else in the world like it. At this point, if she's right, and there's the other DNA experts looked at her study and just blew it apart, said it was like garbage. But I'm not a DNA expert. Let me take her at her word. If she's right, she's essentially said it's paranormal anyway. What else on earth has this novel DNA structure that's not like anything else on earth? Again, she called it angel DNA. There's that DNA study. Brian Sykes from Oxford did another study, and he is like world-class genealogist, study this stuff. And he took all these samples, some of the same samples, by the way, that were used in the other study, and he finds nothing. The most interesting thing he found was an Asiatic bear that they thought was extinct, but it's still a bear. Otherwise, everything coming through was human, bear. They knew what it was. They could determine exactly what it was. So DNA, inconclusive at best, if not no evidence whatsoever. The hair, always inconclusive. Even if the first time it comes back as something, unknown primate, they test it again, inconclusive. Blood, same. Feces, same. So we have all this interesting evidence. All of it is inconclusive. Again, the footprints being the best evidence and being a second-class relic. Something, it's not even part of the thing's body. It's something, a mark it left. So the evidence is really shaky. The film evidence. I used to be a big believer in the Patty film. I'm not so sure anymore for multiple reasons. Some of it sort of inside information, which I can't talk about. But more than that, just me just thinking about this, and there's just things about it that bother me. I've taken photos of, and it always comes out blurry. This common term in the Bigfoot world is blob squatch. There's a very funny comedian, Mitch Hedberg. He unfortunately he's dead, but he had a joke. He said, "I think Bigfoot is just actually blurry,
Yeah.
and that's really scary because it's just this blurry thing out there walking around." I'm actually lean a lot closer to that than I do to, anything else. Yes, it's funny, but it's like he might have been onto something there. So yeah, the photographic evidence is garbage for the most part. I believe that in the next few years, we're going to get some information that breaks everyone's heart as regards to the Patty film. And there's going to be a reckoning because a lot of people have hung their hat on that in the Bigfoot world. And when that gets proven false, as I believe it will, a lot of people are going to, first of all, you'll get two things. There'll be a lot of people reacting in a way as, oh, it was all garbage. It's all fake. Their heart will be broken. And then other people will get right down to conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Saying, well, yeah, that one's fake, but there was a real one that, whatever. They'll come up with these different things. Yeah, there was a costume, but when they got there, a real Bigfoot kidnapped the guy in the costume, and it's actually a real Bigfoot you see in the film or whatever. They'll come up with conspiracy theories. But I believe they're going to have to reckon with that in the coming years. We'll see, though. I might be wrong. At best, it'll remain inconclusive forever, and that it would be a perfect badge for the phenomenon if it did.
Yeah, I don't think it's too old to. There's no way that can be conclusive evidence at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
But the last thing, well, not the last thing, but one thing I want to say about the flesh and blood hypothesis is these weirder topics that we're about to get into, they really resonated more with me and really changed my opinion on it. But I have to admit that I am a city folk and I really have no scale of like what the actual wilderness is like in the US. So if it actually is feasible that such creatures could exist, I actually don't really know. And I love nature and I know bits and bobs, but I don't have extensive wilderness knowledge. So I don't know, and a lot of people who are interested in Bigfoot as a real creature are wilderness people. They're hunters. Yeah. So it's interesting because you're like, you would think they'd be pretty good at identifying creatures. So they're pretty confident about what they see. It is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of them have started with a sighting. It's sort of convinced real.
Yeah. So, but I mean, we'll go into, we'll work our way into that there might be kind of a both and aspect to it.
Maybe. I'm not there anymore.
Okay,
a lot of my friends are. A lot of my friends, I do believe they're trying to be inclusive and they're trying to, kind of put their arms around the flesh and blood people and say, there's room for all of us. And again, I don't know. I could be wrong at the end of the day. They could be right. But in my own mind, in my own heart anymore, I don't leave much room for there being a flesh and blood creature. But again, just me.
Speaking of comparing Bigfoot to poltergeists, in your 2-volume book, Where the Footprints End, which is a reference to what you mentioned earlier, how there's all these reports of footprint tracks just abruptly ending very mysteriously. You and your co-author, Josh Cutchin, you draw parallels between Bigfoot and other paranormal concepts. Much like, I mean, the poltergeist thing is one of them, and you coined your own kind of term for that, right?
Wilderness geist. Yeah.
Okay. Wilderness geist. But then also you draw parallels to fairies, aliens, witches, which is one I'm going to talk about a lot because I really like that. Women in white, men in black. I want to go over just a couple of those if that's okay.
Sure.
Fairies, of course, that's a big interest of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard for me to see the similarities between Bigfoot and fairies. They both could be considered nature spirits, of course.
Absolutely.
This is something that people might not know, is that there are Littlefoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And some people, maybe people of a more flesh and blood hypothesis mindset will say that they're young Bigfoot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it also seems like they might be their own thing. There might just be little people Bigfoot.
Right.
Which is really cool. And Pennsylvania has its own kind of folklore regarding such a creature. The Albatwitch.
Mm-hmm.
I also actually very recently picked up on the fact that the puka, which is one of my favorite Irish fairies, who has many different forms, from a little goblin to a rabbit to a black dog, a horse, a goat. It's also reported sometimes as a large, hairy man. Yeah, which is really cool.
Yeah.
You also touch on, in this chapter, you touch on green Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
Which they go hand in hand because green it's the fairies' color. I mean, in Celtic countries, they would say that green is the fairies' color. You don't wear green because you might offend them. I personally love when green comes up in paranormal encounters, whether it's lights or mists or whatever. It does a lot. So, but there are green Bigfoot.
There are, and those are my favorite.
Awesome.
Those are my favorite Bigfoot due to a local sighting. So my very first book was called Beyond the Seventh Gate, and I break down the legends of this local area called Toad Road here. And one of the reports there I found in the newspaper was a guy said he was attacked by a green-haired monster on Toad Road. And it was so wild.
Yeah.
And it was actually, that led to my first appearance on Sasquatch Chronicles because he had this wonderful show that's become known as the Two Brothers in Sasquatch Chronicles lore. But one of the things they were seeing, and they said, he's like, I'm telling you, one of these things is green. So I know it sounds bizarre, but one of them is green. And so when my book came out shortly after that, I contacted Wes from Sasquatch Chronicles and said, look, there's a green Bigfoot here too. And he had me on to talk about it. And that was sort of the start of our friendship. So that's what got me interested. People want to send me Bigfoot statues and figurines and stuff. And I beg them not to. I have enough of that kind of thing, except for green ones. I collect green ones. I collect green Bigfoot because I love it so much. There's one called Fluorescent Freddy from Indiana, from a place called French Lick, Indiana. That's one of my favorites.
So he's a glowing green Bigfoot?
Well, he had glowing eyes, right? But he was bright green colored. So they called him Fluorescent Freddy. This is a good example of how the flesh and blood people pick and choose information. The reports that came out in the Bigfoot book said, oh yeah, he was called Fluorescent Freddy because of his eyes, because of his glowing eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, glowing eyes is a big problem. But they never mentioned that he was also green and that people were saying, like, yeah, no, this thing is green. That was left out of the flesh. I found that when I went back to look, I found the original newspaper articles and Fluorescent Freddy was green. It's a green Bigfoot. There's a couple other out there that I'm forgetting about, and you get one here and there, and they're just my favorite because they're so weird. It's so weird. And again, flesh and blood people were like, whoa, he had lichen growing in his fur and leaves and branches. They were camouflaging themselves. They're weaving leaves in their fur. Like, come on, people know what they're looking at, or they don't, and everything's a bear. Choose one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tend to go with people know what they're looking at.
Also, probably won't linger on this, but it's worth mentioning there are Sasquatch.
Yeah, people have seen Bigfoot swimming incredibly far from shore. Like guys on ships have seen Bigfoot swimming out. And what is happening? There's a famous case, and I won't remember because it was in one of Josh's chapters, but I know there's a famous case from the past where they captured a wild man at sea, and it was essentially like a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
So yeah, this takes, the wild man entity takes all these different forms. It's just out there.
Yeah. Okay, let's move into witches. So in this chapter, you go into hairy witches,
Mm-hmm.
witches seen with Bigfoot, and also Bigfoot encounters and sleep paralysis, because that's something that's typically associated with witches, and old hag syndrome is what it's called a lot of the time. So the chapter starts with a quote from the Blair Witch Project.
I was laying down on the leaves, a pile of leaves, kind of watching my phone and looking up at the sky.
Sure.
And all of a sudden I felt like something was near me.
Right.
Kind of an eerie feeling. It was like a woman, only on her arm, on her hands and everything. It was like hair, like a real dark, almost black hair.
Uh-huh.
Like a horse.
Like fur?
Yeah, like a fur, like horse fur. Then her arms, she had like a shawl.
Right.
Wool shawl over her.
And she scared you? She threatened you?
And she didn't say anything, but she just kept staring, and then she
Right.
opened up her shawl.
And what was under there?
And under it there was hair on her body like a
So
horse.
she was hairy from head to toe.
Have you seen the Blair Witch?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's been 200 years because I saw it in the theater the day it was released.
That's awesome.
In Maryland. Yeah.
Okay, do you care if I talk about it a little bit?
Go for it.
Because this kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
I already love that movie. I just think it's such an amazing movie. But having that quote and the movie referenced and Where Are the Footprints and totally made me think of the movie in a whole new light, because so the quote is, the woman saying that she saw the witch and she opened up her dress and she was hairy from head to toe and covered in black fur like a horse. And I'm thinking about it, and listen, spoilers if you haven't seen this classic 25-year-old film, but what did they find in the woods? I started thinking about it. What did they find? They find these weird tree structure, these little tree.
Little stick glyphs. Yeah.
Yes. And they hear at nights when they're in their tent, they hear the clacking of rocks together. And they find these rock cairns outside their tent. And there's even sort of a gruesome gifting scene, which we didn't talk about gifting. Bigfoot is known for sometimes leaving gifts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's bloody human teeth and a crude little box made out of sticks. But so in so many ways, I'm thinking about like, oh my gosh, it totally mirrors a Bigfoot experience.
Yeah.
Including that you never see what it is.
The story I referenced before about the guy with the interlocking sticks, that was a story. I'm drawing a blank on the artist's name. He claimed it to be true. He wrote it for one of these like Weird Tales magazines that Heart, but he claimed it to be true, that he came upon this property that had these weird interwoven stick things. That story inspired Blair Witch.
Wow.
Yeah.
You never see the witch, so it could be anything. But also, I have to just mention, Tim, in the movie, there's the legends of the Blair Witch, of course, but there's also the tale of a local hermit who's said to abduct children.
Is there?
Yes. I just mentioned it at the beginning, I think, but I was like, oh man.
It's been so long, I forgot.
Yeah, they do mention a hermit. Such a great movie. And they set it in Burkittsville, Maryland. I wonder if there's any Bigfoot reports there. I'm sure you don't know.
There are.
There are?
Yeah, it's nearby. Yeah, they've had Bigfoot reports there for sure.
That's awesome. So that totally blew my mind. Okay, so that was my little rant about the Blair Witch. The next topic that really interested me was women in white.
Oh, yeah.
And briefly, for anyone who isn't familiar with what a woman in white is, or sometimes called a white lady, it's a specific and a non-specific thing at the same time. It's an established thing, but they can wear different hats. Only one color dress, but different hats. There's a long history of them, of course, in Europe. A lot of the times in Europe, they are kind of almost like a banshee associated with royalty. It's like a ghost that kind of follows royal families. But in the US, they're often just kind of like an archetypal ghost. Often a woman who's died under tragic circumstances like murder or suicide or an accident. They also have a strong connection to water and cemeteries. And I was wondering if Bigfoot has any particular frequency near cemeteries.
Absolutely. Rural cemetery encounters are absolutely a thing with Bigfoot. Yeah, for sure.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I would ask about water, but that's probably pretty obvious.
Oh, water too. So as an example, if I go on a Bigfoot investigation, someone calls me, I saw Bigfoot. If I can, I get there as soon as I can, meet him at the place if they are willing to do so. And one of my questions among many is, where's the nearest creek or body of water? And I have never gotten, oh, there's not one around here. As I say that, I live in Pennsylvania and there's creeks everywhere. So, take that into account. But I've, again, never gotten oh no, there's no creek around. It's always like, oh yeah, there's a creek right there. There's the nearest creek. So yeah, there's certainly a connection there of some sort.
So you found that women in white and Bigfoot have some sort of relationship to one another.
Yeah, this was my baby as far as volume 1 of the book.
Oh, I love that.
And when I started, Josh, my co-author, I said, I'm writing this chapter. We're kind of splitting up the work. And I said, I'm going to write a chapter on women in white. And he said, you're not going to find enough for a chapter. I said, well, let me try. Let me see what I can find. It started with that the same account for Sasquatch Chronicles, those brothers. And they were having this really intense, multiple Bigfoot encounters around their house. But they were also seeing this strange woman. And they said she was old and wore all white, but it was like kind of dirty white. And she had these big feet, like big shoes. They said it looked like almost like she was wearing clown shoes, like shoes way too big for her. And she walked around and at one point, and at this point, Sasquatch Chronicles is a very flesh and blood show. Wes has grown and changed and more power to him. He's very honest as far as that goes. But back in at this time, Sasquatch Chronicles only talked about these things as if they were flesh and blood. But these guys are having these intense encounters, et cetera, et cetera. One day they're seeing this woman in the neighborhood. They think she's homeless or something. This is somewhere near the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. And one day they can hear these Sasquatch. They said they would be on the ridges up behind their house and they could hear them just going nuts. And they hear them up there like violently screaming and stuff. And this woman's like walking up that way. And they try to stop her. They're like yelling at her like, hey, don't go up there. Don't go up there. And she ignores them and goes up there. And they thought, oh, she's dead. They killed her. Next morning they see her walking back down. And they walked up to her and they're, trying to stop her and ask her questions. They're like, hey, hey, hey. Finally, she won't stop. She just keeps walking. Finally, one of them says, I command you to stop. And they said she turned and looked at him. I think they said she gave him like this really creepy, eerie smile and then just disappeared. Incredible story and very weird and very challenging for Sasquatch Chronicles at the time. And again, I tip my hat to Wes because he's telling the full story. He could have not reported that because that information came later in a different talk. He could have just never mentioned that on the show, but he talked about it. And I think that was one of the things that sort of started bending Wes to look at the phenomenon more holistically. I don't think he's all the way where I am, but he's certainly more open to it being a weirder, stranger phenomenon. So that was an amazing story. But at the time, I would follow the Sasquatch Chronicles like they had a forum on the website for members, and I would go in there and read these posts. And I started seeing people saying, you know what? I was in the woods one day, and I was driving down this forest road, and I saw this woman in white, really weird, crazy looking woman in white. And then I went about a mile later, I had a Bigfoot encounter. Bigfoot walked out and crossed. A bunch of people started talking about, I saw a weird woman in white and had this Bigfoot encounter. It's like, okay, maybe this is a thing. Then I start talking to witnesses locally and I start getting information. There's an area called Pond Bank here. And there's a woman in white story there. Basically, the legend was that she drowned her baby, I think, in the pond, or the baby drowned. I'm not sure whether, what happened. Mm-hmm. And you can stand on the pond, on one side of the pond at night and say, white lady, I have your baby. And she's supposed to come out. And you see this woman in white. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy was taking me. He had this very weird encounters, pretty intense encounters with Bigfoot. And he took me to that. He said, I know you like the woman in white stories. And he tells me this woman in white story. I'm interviewing him for the podcast at this location, less than a mile as the crow flies from these two Bigfoot encounters he had. And the whole interview is really interesting. I did not hear this while we were there. The whole interview, you can hear, it sounds like Tuvan throat singing underneath. We're talking the whole time. I'm interviewing him. He's telling the story. And underneath, you can hear this whoa, lower than that. But the whole time. And it's really odd. Did not hear it when we were there. It's only on the recording. I was able to capture a couple seconds of it when we weren't talking, but it's under us the whole entire interview. Very weird. Went back to that same area in the spring with my friend Brix and recorded some kind of weird chanting around it, again, that we didn't hear while we were there. It's this chanting. It's very almost musical that was there. So it's a very weird place, but it has this woman in white story with it. Another local guy. I went out and they're talking about all these Bigfoot encounters. And this guy offered to take me to a place he called Bigfoot Valley, where he says, you have to camp there for weeks, but I guarantee you'll see Bigfoot, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I don't have weeks to camp someplace, but he's telling me he's in this place and he's in a tree stand, and out of nowhere he just sees this woman wearing all white kind of walk below his tree stand, and she does some kind of ritual and walks away. And he actually climbs out of the tree stand and tries to get her attention. He's like, hey, 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 and she just kind of ignores him and keeps walking, just like the two brothers story. So this is sort of what tuned me into him. And I'm thinking, like, there's got to be something here. And I'm looking up these women in white, lady in white legends. I always say woman in white because sometimes I say they're no ladies. Like some of these, as they're quite gruff, some of them. So I'm looking into these legends, and one of them is with the Habsburgs in Austria. And they had the legend of this woman in white. And she would appear as a death omen. And whenever they saw it, they would, this is someone's going to die in the family, right? And they named her, and they said her name was Ursula. And I'm reading about this, and it says, which is my daughter's name, coincidentally.
Oh.
Did not name her after this woman in white. Named her after the saint, but they said Ursula is a medieval form of Perchta. And they called it a goddess in this article from around 1900 or so. I found it. So now I'm okay. Well, who's this Perchta? So I go look up Perchta, and that broke open the whole thing for me. So Perchta, again, some people call her goddess. She's more like a fairy figure,
kind of like sometimes a household kind of spirit too, right?
Yeah.
Slavic,
Germanic, Slavic.
Okay.
Yeah, and Perchta was a woman in white. She could be young and beautiful or old and hag-like. She often manifested with one or both feet that were big bird's feet.
Mm-hmm. Like duck feet or something.
Or a swan, I think. Yeah, duck or a swan.
Yeah.
Now, in the Bigfoot world, there's a big problem for the flesh and blood people with three-toed tracks. and they appear with great frequency. And the flesh and blood people say, well, they only appeared around Boggy Creek and then, in Pennsylvania in the 1970s. Not true. They have appeared and still continue to appear all over the place. And this is a problem. A primate should have 5 toes. And a lot of them say, well, those are lizard men, the 3 toes. They're not. These are people who are seeing Bigfoot, and they don't look like lizard tracks.
There's lizard men?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in as much as there's anything else.
Yeah. It's new to me.
But if you think about a bird foot, it certainly looks like a 3-toed track. So we have that. And think back to that Sasquatch Chronicle story when they said her shoes were way too big, like clown shoes. Very interesting aspect of that. And Perkta was like, could be a bad thing. Like you see her in the woods. She was interested in children. She could beckon children away, like I said, just like Bigfoot. But she had this retinue, these 2 groups that followed her. One's called the Heimchen. And these were the souls of children that she had led away to the woods. Sometimes, it depends on the legend, sometimes it was just children in general, sometimes it was unbaptized children that she had led off to the woods. And they took the form of orbs, of lights that followed her around. When you get this orb phenomenon, this unexplained light phenomenon with Bigfoot all the time. The other part of her retinue was called the Perkten. And these were hairy wild men that followed her around and caused havoc, et cetera, et cetera. So it's explicitly right there. And that sort of opens up this woman in white thing for me. But then I start finding folklore from all over the place. Africa, England. I haven't found any from the Far East yet. I think it's only a matter of time. It'll come up. I think I found an account from Australia, even Native American accounts all over the world of these wild men where they say its counterpart is either a female, white Bigfoot or some kind of normal human woman in white. And it's everywhere. Like it became, as one of Josh's favorite phrases, like drinking from a fire hose. I got account after account after account of this from folklore. These wild men, they have this woman in white as their counterpart. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, if you don't mind, I have a really short little account I'd like to read to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
This story is from the website Liminal Earth, a place where people share their personal experiences with the paranormal. This was submitted by Adam N. and took place in July of 2011. My girlfriend and I were up at my hunting cabin in the Endless Mountains region of Pennsylvania. In the middle of the afternoon, we decided to drive over to a nearby lake and go fishing for a few hours. We were traveling down a paved 2-lane country road. There were dairy farms, cornfields, and farmhouses on both sides. Suddenly, I saw something crossing the road about 100 yards from us. It appeared to be about 7 to 8 feet tall, extremely skinny, wearing all white with a white veil over its head. It walked across the street in long strides, dangling its arms down by its side with its wrists cupped backwards. It reached the other side of the street, which was a large open field, but our view was temporarily blocked by a thin hedgerow of trees and shrubs. When we reached the field it had crossed into, the being had vanished. Upon seeing that it vanished, my girlfriend and I were silent for a second, and then turned to each other at the same time saying, "Did you just see that?" The hair on my arms stood up immediately. Later that night, still a bit shaken up from the experience, I was using the restroom in our cabin. The curtains were closed, and I heard a tap, tap, tap on the window. I refused to open the shades. My girlfriend and I slept with a loaded shotgun next to the bed that night. Really a creepy description.
Yeah.
A 7 to 8 foot tall being with a white veil, and it had the long arms with its hands cut backwards. It was like a hybrid of a Bigfoot and a lady in white.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really wild one. I'd not run into that one. I wish I had it for the book now.
Yeah, darn it. And then also in the Women in White chapter, you go into white Bigfoot, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an excerpt from the book Ozark Tales and Superstitions by Philip W. Steele, published in 1983. This is a section of the chapter Tales of the Supernatural called The Monster of Peterbottom Cave. The story of the monster of Peterbottom Cave has been selected for inclusion in this collection for 3 reasons. First, it is unique, different from all other legends common in the Ozarks. Second, it is a relatively new story. Third, it provides insight into the way legends and lore originate. Although the story cannot be proven, it appears to be based on actual events. It all began when a doctor wanted for murder found refuge from the law in the forest surrounding Peter Bottom, a fertile meadow that lies along a bend in the War Eagle River near the War Eagle community in northwest Arkansas. He spent 20 years hiding in the area before his identity was discovered, and he was arrested by law officials. When found, the man was judged insane and sent to the state mental institution. Shortly before he died, in the early 1960s, he called in reporters and told them that since he was near death, he wanted to tell the story of a monster that lived in the cave near Peter Bottom and to issue a warning to stay away from the area. The story appeared on the back pages of the local newspapers. But since the man had a history of mental disorder, it was generally treated as a figment of his imagination. The story did stir some interest and concern among the residents of the War Eagle area, but since no one else had ever seen the monster, it was soon forgotten, at least until 1966. One warm Sunday afternoon in the spring of that year, two men in their late 20s, whose names have been withheld by request, were riding their horses down the steep road that leads into Peter Bottom. Suddenly, they were almost run off the road by a tractor coming at full speed out of the bottom. The man on the tractor stopped and warned the boys to stay out, as there was something horrible living there. He had been in the field, beginning his spring plowing, he said, when he had spotted the monster. The boys thanked the man for the warning, but decided they would never believe his story unless they saw the monster for themselves. As they rode further into the bottom, their horses became restless and soon refused to go further. The boys tied the horses to trees, then walked into the beautiful valley meadow. Suddenly, they spotted what appeared to be a large white clump of fur lying in the grass near a cedar tree. At first they thought it must be a dead cow or horse, but as they came within 10 yards of it, the clump of white fur stood upright. The boys later admitted that their fear may have led them to exaggerate, but they described the animal, as they recalled it, as follows. It stood upright like a man, and its body was completely covered with snow-white hair about 3 inches long. They estimated that its height was between 8 and 9 feet. The creature's body and facial characteristics seemed more human, even than those of an ape. Its face and palm of its hands were pinkish in color, and were the only areas not covered by white hair. They also noticed that a strong offensive odor, which they described as resembling old coffee grounds, seemed to emanate from the creature. As the men stood paralyzed, unable to believe what they were seeing, the creature began slowly walking toward them and making a strange sound, like the beep, beep of a radio. They turned and ran as it moved toward them. Reaching their horses, they spent no time in putting distance between themselves and Peter Bottom. The parents of one of these men later said their son was almost in a state of shock by the time he reached his home near the Nob Hill community. He spent several days in the hospital with a nervous disorder. The young men's tales soon spread throughout the region, and over the next several months, several hunting parties were formed to search Peter Bottom and the cave, but the strange creature has never been seen again. Over the years, however, cattle have been found in the area, torn apart in a strange way. One man's corpse was discovered near his barn several years ago, his limbs ripped from his body. And chicken houses have been looted and torn to bits by some creature of unusual strength. The story is similar to many tales of Bigfoot or Sasquatch monsters that have been reported in the swamps of southern Arkansas, the forests of northern California, and in other remote regions. Most of these monsters, however, are said to have dark brown hair. The albino monster of Peter Bottom is therefore unique. No one can be sure whether or not the two young men really saw the creature. But Peter Bottom is no longer farmed, and only those of great fortitude venture into this beautiful valley, home of the Ozarks' only monster.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, what is even a 1960s beep? I don't even know what that sound is. What does a 1960s radio beep sound like?
They might be talking about almost like a Morse code kind of beep, like that kind of radio beep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really weird, the radio beep.
Yeah, that is really strange. There's a lot of white Bigfoot encounters. all over the country, and there's big problems with this as regards to a natural animal because it's shit camouflage unless you're in the snow.
Yeah.
And these white Bigfoot are seen everywhere. And if they're albinos, the percentage of albinos, I break it down in the chapter and I forget, but it's very small. The percentage of albinism in naturally occurring in animals. And the amount of white Bigfoot reported, if you consider like how rare, if this is an animal, how rare it would have to be, how rare people see them. The chance of seeing a white one would be infinitesimally small. I mean, and yet there's reports of them all around. There's a pretty convincing film of one from Pennsylvania. It's the breakdown seemed to show it squinting, which masks don't do. It's pretty convincing. And that's actually up by Scranton, not far from that Endless Mountain region.
So we'll circle back to the wild men because, as you explained, it is an archetype.
Mm-hmm.
So if Bigfoot is not a flesh and blood creature, I'm someone who very much thinks in symbols, and I'm very open to these kind of Jungian archetypes and circling back to UFOs. I mean, Carl Jung has this treatise on UFOs where his theory is that they are not an extraterrestrial craft. It's basically subconscious thought breaking into reality and manifesting. So, I mean, that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
I know it's really out there for some people, but there's this archetype. It could be some kind of manifestation of just human consciousness in its habitat, which would be the wild. And this wild men play into hermits as well, too, which you have a book on.
Mm-hmm.
So do hermits and Bigfoot collide?
They do. Yeah. And in fact, the hermit that got me into hermits in general, coincidentally, my wife had bought me a picture of this guy. His name was William Woodruff from Colebrook River, Connecticut. And I didn't really do anything with him. She's like, "Oh, you like wild man? He kind of looks like a wild man." And just gave me this picture of this hermit. And when I got around to researching him, he had this incredible story. And then I researched some more and more I'm finding. But there was a wild man flap in Winstead, which is about 7 miles away from Colebrook River, where this guy lived. And it was pretty intense. Like, people were seeing these creatures. They were being very aggressive. At one point, the entire stagecoach full of people unloaded their guns at this thing to no effect, which is another thing. A lot of Bigfoot are shot to no effect. People who are crack shots who are sure they hit it, so that it did not react at all. But in any case, bunch of people shooting it, don't kill it. And very intense encounters. And around the time I found an article, someone on that road between Colebrook River and Winstead, Connecticut, they see something step out and they're scared it's the wild man, but it ends up being a regular human. And they describe what he's wearing. He's real, gruff and has a little beard and everything. And I truly think it was William Woodruff. So not only was there a wild man flap happening while he was alive and in the area, but I think he was mistaken for this wild man at one point.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that happens.
Yeah. My one book where I try to not write about Bigfoot, and here I have to write about Bigfoot.
Of course. So if people who don't know what you look like, I mean, you have very long white hair and beard. Were you rocking the wild man look before you got back into Bigfoot?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting, right?
Yeah, I've always had long hair, and I've been a hairy person.
So you were called.
I was on the Lakota Reservation, Pine Ridge, and spoke to a woman. She was the wife of one of the more famous medicine men up there. He had passed away, but I went to talk to her about Bigfoot, and when she first saw me, she said, "You kind of look like Bigfoot." I got a kick out of that.
I was going to say about the hermit and just the archetype of the wild man. I mean, if you look at the hermit tarot card,
Mm-hmm.
it symbolizes, introspection and being alone and inner wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and guidance. And what do hermits do is they go out into nature and be alone to basically build up themselves and gain knowledge through solitude. And so, I mean, yeah, if Bigfoot is this physical manifestation of an archetype, that's exactly where he would be, I think.
So I see the fairies book behind you. Of course, Brian Froud is very popular, but Alan Lee also has art in there,
Mm-hmm.
who is one of my favorite artists. Best known probably for Lord of the Rings. He did a lot of stuff for the movie and books and everything.
Yeah, Tolkien. Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite pieces of art, and I'm lucky enough to have a signed print of this framed from Alan Lee, is his version of Merlin. And it's Merlin as a wild man. And I loved this before I got into Bigfoot. I always loved the image of it. If you look it up, it's just an incredible piece of art.
Yeah, Merlin retreats into the cave, right?
Yeah. Merlin has a wild man phase where he literally becomes a hermit, but they call him a wild man at this time. He learns to speak to the animals and, kind of goes off by himself. So it's this amazing, again, it enters into Arthurian stuff and figures into the wild man as wizard kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's probably pretty safe to say. I mean, I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with anyone who's had a Bigfoot encounter, but I would think that you do kind of get like this, it's kind of this defining moment.
It tends to be, yeah.
And it could probably go either way. It can be kind of like an awakening moment,
Mm-hmm.
or it could probably put a lot of fear into people. And that's what I think the symbolic read on deep nature is. It's subconscious thought and emotion, and that people really, they can either take that and build, or they can totally shut down and run away because it's heavy, right?
Yeah. I think it's similar to the UFO experience. When people have a, very intense UFO thing, they tend to go through the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's very important to note the changing wild man. And I believe this says something about the Bigfoot, our wild man. Now, if you go back to medieval times and you talk about these Wadwos and these European wild men, a lot of times they talk about them and they portray them as these sort of wilderness wizards. They would go to them for advice. They lived out, they were other, but they were sort of these wise things of the forest. You get more towards modern times, and some of these reports I have from the 1800s, not all of them, most of them are just, naked hairy men or women.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them, and again, more than just one, like, several of these reports have them in clothes, like torn up, shredded clothes, half dressed, sometimes carrying rusty muskets that don't work. Things like that. Odd. Often they're cooking food when they find them in these stories in the 1800s. They'll come upon these wild men cooking food. And you progress nowadays. We have this very wild man, this very savage Bigfoot. And if we want to bring in Dogman, Brother Richard said this to me, and I think this is absolutely brilliant. There is a problem, a real problem with flesh and blood Dogmen, because that creature should not exist. A dog is, evolutionarily speaking, pretty set. It's a pretty serious creature. I mean, anything in nature is pretty much afraid of dogs because they're evolutionary. They got it. They're smart. They've kind of gotten to where they need to be. If they would have needed hands, they would have evolved hands, is the way I look at it. So now we have this thing that's like a dog. It's got hocked legs and it's walking upright, which makes no sense at all. It's got a dog head, which I've seen, again, I'm not a zoologist. I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I've seen a woman talk about it. And she said, you put that dog head upright on a sort of human torso, it doesn't work physiologically. Mm-hmm. I'm not the expert. I just know what was said. So you have this very problematic dogman, but it fits in because I think our wild man is getting wilder, perhaps by necessity. If you think about the way we live versus the way we used to live, we were very connected to the land. We had to plant. We were agrarian and hunters. As time goes on, less of that. If we don't want to, we don't have to ever be in the dark. We don't have to feel the change of seasons. We don't have to go into the woods for any reason if we don't want to. We have gotten away from nature. And I think that wild man is maybe our connection. It's like our connection to nature. And the further we get away, the wilder our wild man gets. It gets more wilder and more savage. And perhaps this dog man is another form of that. Because Dogman's showing up in the same place Bigfoot is and is acting a lot like Bigfoot in many ways, but it's got this dog head. So now we're losing any bit of humanity and it's becoming total beast as we get further yet away from nature. Just an idea.
Yeah.
But the UFO changes the other way. The UFO gets more complex over time. It started out with airships. Right before we had dirigibles and stuff, they're describing these like balloons. Goes up to the Art Deco things and all the way up to the 1970s where suddenly people are seeing black triangles right before we get stealth fighters, which are basically black triangles that fly through the sky. And now they've advanced further to where they're just, tubes or jellyfish looking things. They're always beyond us. The technology.
One step ahead. Yeah.
And the wild man. So it gets more advanced and the wild man gets more primitive. It's very, very interesting. But I think that might be a key to something to do with the phenomenon. I really do.
Yeah, it is interesting now how UFO, it's the technology side, and the wild man or Bigfoot. It's, the primordial kind of side. Also, that Alan Lee illustration is absolutely stunning.
Oh, did you look up? Isn't it fantastic? I love it so much.
Yeah.
So moving on to Native Americans.
Right. So it's something that isn't talked about a lot with mainstream Bigfoot culture, is that it is seems like it's very much a part of the Native American culture as well.
Well, I find that flesh and blood people love it. They love to say, yeah, Native Americans encountered this thing, but they're very selective in the way they talk about it. They'll either say Native Americans it's a monolithic belief across all tribes and all cultures, or they'll pick and choose, and they'll say, well, yeah, they say it's just another tribe. They're just like us, but they're wilder and hairier. And they say this and that, but they'll leave out, though, that, yeah, they say it's another tribe just like us, wild and hairy, but they also say they're incredible wizards. They're magic users, and they can do this amazing stuff. Or they'll say, yeah, they're another tribe, but they come and go through reality as they want. They can disappear at will. The flesh and blood, they love to say, oh, this tribe called him Oma, and this tribe called him that, and point to him as if they're all saying, like, yeah, it's a monkey out there, see? And they have these names for it before the Europeans ever got here. They don't do the full reporting on them. If you look at, and I'm not speaking for all Native American cultures, but many of them, if you look at what they're saying, yeah, they'll say it's like, yeah, it's like another tribe or something. But then they'll get into the weird stuff, and they'll say, but it does this, and it does that, and it does these things that we can't do. So again, report on the whole phenomenon. When I went to Pine Ridge, I found it very interesting. And again, I talked to a small sampling of people. I cannot talk for the entire Lakota people, but the people I talked to, everybody but one person had a Bigfoot story. They were all incredible, wonderful stories. Wonderful people, by the way, and just shared their culture and stories with me, and just beautiful experience on Pine Ridge Reservation there. But after they told me their stories, I asked them, I said, what do you think it is? And every single one said, oh, it's a spirit. So they're talking about something that can be very physical, was doing things like breaking into people's trailers and attempting to abduct people, picking up motorcycles and throwing them, like very, very physical at times. And then you said, well, what is it? And they very confidently said, it's a spirit. So this is a big problem. And this is something I had to wrestle with. The idea that something can be very ephemeral and very spirity, very, very not here at one moment. And then the next can touch you, touch things, move things, leave footprints, leave hair behind. It can be very physical at times. I'll say when it wants to. I don't know if that's exactly the way it works, but and that's the biggest obstacle, I think, for people to come over from the flesh and blood hypothesis to this, to understand that. And it leads to things that people say, like, oh, it's interdimensional. How do you know? It might be, but first of all, what does that mean? Like, we can't say it's interdimensional. All I can say is that it's here and then it's not. It's here and then it's not. How it does that, I don't know. My gut is it's some kind of spirit. The most important book, I think, ever written on the paranormal, and the one I recommend to everyone, is called Daemonic Reality, not demonic, Daemonic Reality by Patrick Harper. And I'll get the quote wrong, but Patrick Harper says something along the lines of, they asked him about Bigfoot, and he said, it's just a big hairy fairy. Mm-hmm. So,
well, yeah, maybe what people are trying to convey because I have the same reaction kind of when people say it's interdimensional. It's like, it's just kind of a vague terminology thrown out there. Maybe what they're trying to convey is that it exists on these different planes of physicality. Because what you said earlier about how in ghost hunting, people would throw out powder to get footprints. And I think your point was that things that aren't physical can leave physical evidence. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when I mentioned the both and earlier, that's more of what I meant. It's like that they can be both. They can have physical effects,
right,
but not be wholly physical. And that's something that's really hard for a lot of Western people to wrap their head around, because we just don't think that way anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We've lost our culture of spiritualism, and our idea, and part of it has to do with certain stripes of Christianity where everything is either good or bad. So you have angels and demons, and that's it. So they've lost the idea, and that there's a whole ecosystem of spirits out there. There's everything in between, good, bad, and everything in between. And we've lost that idea, and I think it leads to this idea of very siloed thinking. Like we need to put this here, put this there, put that there. And it leads to people just not wanting to even wrap their head around that kind of thing. You know, I understand the desire too of flesh and blood people to prove this. They want people to believe them, usually because they've had an experience. So they want to do it, and they want to do it in the way that they're not going to be made fun of, right? Oh, you're just, you're making this stuff up, or you don't know what you saw, whatever. How the insults, however you want to do it. I get that, but at some point you have to just go. It's not adding up. It's just not adding up.
Yeah.
You have to look at our ancestors and look at these other cultures who do have a spiritual culture and who have no problem with the idea of these things being physical at one moment and not the next. And we lost that. We lost that idea.
So how does this, because people are going to wonder, well, have you ever seen Bigfoot, Tim? How do you know Bigfoot's real?
I have seen things. I hesitate to say I've seen Bigfoot because I've not had that steps out in front of me, eye to eye contact. Oh, this is a 8 foot tall hairy thing. But I've seen things in the woods that are bigger than things that should be there, that move very fast, things in odd places, like most recently in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania. This is in this week's episode of Strange Familiars. I saw this big black form. It's like black as can be, blacker than the night around it. Certainly manifested and looked like an ape-like thing, and then it would fade out. And I was saying on the episode, I think like flesh and blood people would say, oh, it's just backing up into the forest and they're ninjas, so they can do it perfectly smoothly without making a noise. But to me, it seemed like it was just kind of fading in and out of existence. And then 2 other people saw this. I wasn't alone. But was that Bigfoot? I don't know. I do know that woman who said I looked like Bigfoot. So our first night driving into the reservation, there was 3 of us. There was myself, my friend John, and my friend Lucinda. And we're literally entering the reservation at night, and there's a white owl in the middle of the road. And it takes off and it flies to my right as I'm driving. Takes off and flies to the right. Like, oh, that was neat. And then about a minute later, there's a white owl in the road, in the middle of the road, same place, takes up, flies to the right. Wow, 2 of them. That's incredible.
Further up the road?
Yeah.
Weird.
And I'm literally in my head thinking, oh, we've got 2 owls. It'd be neat if we had 3, one for each of us. A minute later, there's a 3rd owl, white owl, in the middle of the road, takes off, flies to the right. It was the exact, we were in a film loop.
Yeah.
It was the exact same looking owl, the exact same movement, 3 times in a row. So that was our, okay, this is going to be an interesting time. The first day we're there, Pine Ridge, you kind of need a native host. You don't want to, as a white person, just be roaming around the reservation. And we had a wonderful hosts, wonderful, wonderful people. And it was a married couple. And they're taking us around basically through the prairies, rolling hills. And we were driving on, they were ostensibly roads, but they were really trails we were driving on. And just the landscape's beautiful. I've been on West Coast, East Coast, and a little bit in the middle of the country, but I've never been on the plains. So seeing the sort of...
Yeah, where is the Pine Ridge Reservation?
It's South Dakota.
Okay.
So it's these beautiful rolling hills and prairies, and there's wild horses out there. It's just gorgeous. And, like no landscape I'd ever been in before. So I'm just loving life. I'm just taking it in, and it's great. We're driving around, and they're basically just showing us, the land. And I dropped them back off at their place. I said, hey, can we come back tonight and just be out there at night? I just wanted to be out in the hills at night. And they're like, yeah, no problem. We'll go with you. Right. So we come back, pick them up, and we're heading up, and it's dusky kind of time. It's not, still plenty of light as we're heading out there. And I first see some dogs. I'm driving. So there's 5 people in the car, right? No, wait, there's me, John, Lucinda. Yeah. And the couple. Yeah. So there's 5 people in the car. I'm driving. The one host is sitting next to me. His wife's in the back, I think between John and Lucinda. So then I pass these dogs, which not terribly unusual. Reservation dogs are like a real thing. You tend to see quite a few dogs out there, and they're all awesome. By the way, I love them to death. But there's a guy hiking, and they had told us, they said, well, you won't see anybody out here. Nobody's going to be out here. And so here somebody's out here, and I'm expecting it to be a native guy. And I very slowly kind of pull up next to him. Now, he was wearing a pack. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt with the hood up, and he was carrying a walking stick. And the walking stick was like as tall as I could reach my hand up. So 8 feet tall, probably, something like that. Massive walking stick, ridiculous walking stick for someone to be carrying. as a hiker, it's like, why are you doing that to yourself? It's just like,
Not very practical.
yeah. And he's got these, I don't know, 4 or 5 dogs with him. And I looked over and I said, oh my gosh, he's got my facial hair. I literally made a mental note of that. Like, so to me, looked like a white dude. And our host says, well, go up here and turn around and then we'll come back and park. And he had me turn around in a place. And I thought, this guy's going to think we're coming back on him because we didn't go that far. It was a minute. I timed it later on the trip because the way the soil is, I could see literally where we turned around. So it was a minute to get up and back from where I was to where this guy was. When we get back there and he's gone, and this was on a ridge and we could see on both sides, this guy has completely disappeared. And I immediately said to John, I was like, John, where'd he go? And John's like, I don't know. And the host, the male host, was the only skeptic I met. He was the only guy that didn't have a story. And he immediately says, oh, he just went down that trail. There's another ranch down there. I said, well, it's not really where he went as much as how fast we should still be able to see him. And he's like, oh, that's where he went. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This is very weird. Mm-hmm. Well, we're hanging out up there and he has a big spotlight. It gets dark. And at some point, he shoots the spotlight onto this thing in the field. And it's this black thing. It's just black as can be. When his spotlight hit that, I jumped. I literally jumped back like, whoa. Because to me, it looked like Mothman, like crouching down in the field. And his wife actually let out a little scream. And then he says, oh, that's just some old car seats somebody left in the field out there. Well, he lived there. I assumed, oh, he must know. So I kind of stopped with that. I just let it go, right? Then the wind picks up. The wind started howling before we left, like really, really like aggressive wind. So we leave. I go back to the hotel. I have a dream. The dream is the exact same. I'm driving up the hill. Everything's the same. I see the hiker. I don't know if the dogs were in the dream or not. I was concentrating on the hiker though. But now the hiker's Bigfoot, and the staff makes sense because it's the right size for Bigfoot, right? Mm-hmm. Like, wow. Like, and I wake up and I told John, like, isn't that neat? Well, then we go to this woman's house who says I look like Bigfoot. Interesting, because I said, oh, he's got my facial hair.
And you walk with a staff too.
Yeah. She tells all her stories, and at the end she says, have you ever seen Bigfoot? And I said the same thing to you. I'm not sure. I don't know. I've seen some things, et cetera, et cetera. She says, well, have you ever asked if you could see Bigfoot? And I said, no, but I will. She's like, yeah, try it. Just ask. Say, I'd like to see, what can I see you? Just ask politely. I said, I will try that. So a couple of days go by. We collected more stories, et cetera, et cetera. And they have this wonderful event for us. The community's there, and they taught us how to make a traditional teepee. It was incredible. It's like, I mean, once in a lifetime thing. And they said, since you helped put the teepee up, you can stay in it tonight if you'd like to. Yes. Yes is the answer. When am I going to get a chance to do that? So we come back and we're hanging out in the teepee and stuff. And I walked away from John and Lucinda and from everybody, just not hundreds of yards, just, 50 yards away. It's beautiful. I just wanted to be there and be by myself in the darkness there. And I'm looking up at the hill, and it's literally a hill where this guy had told me earlier in the day at that gathering. He said, yeah, I had Bigfoot walk down that hill, pace me right down that hill. So I'm literally looking at that hill where he told this story. And I said, I'm ready. I'm ready to see you. I'd really like to see you. And then I realized I wasn't asking, and I rephrased it. I said, can I see you? And people in this talk about mind speak. Now, I didn't hear words. I call it heart speak because this feeling came over me, and I got an answer, and it was, you already have. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means what I'm going to go into further about this hiker. I don't know if it means one of these other things I saw. I don't know what that means. And I don't know if that means I don't get to see anything again. I don't think it does because of what happened up in Schuylkill County. But in any case, last day of vacation, I said, hey, I want to go back up to that ridge. I want to time how long it takes me to go from the spot where we saw the guy to turn around. Go up to the ridge. I said, John, get out and try to run. Like, go as fast as you can. Try to disappear. I want to see if you can do it. So get up, turn around. And remember, this guy had 5 dogs. Not only, they weren't on leashes. Not only did he have to disappear, he had to wrangle 5 dogs to disappear. I turn around, come back, John's still there. Took a minute. Like I said, I timed. I could see right where I turned around before. We get out, and the host, again, he's like determined to prove that this was a normal human. And he's like, well, he probably went this way down this trail. And he's off. He's running. And I'm trying to keep up with him. I can't do it. John's he's got first, John's next, and so by the time I get there, he's like, well, this might be a footprint here, and this might be a footprint here. By the time I get there, there's 3 sets of footprints beyond whatever he's saying might be a footprint. And eventually I just said, look, it's not about where he went. It's about how fast he got there. Like, we should be able to see him. We should have been able to see him. And I just gave up. And I said, this is my last day here. I'm just going to walk around the prairie, like, and just enjoy the place. So he and John are off, looking at maybe tracks. And I'm walking through the fields. I'm just loving it, just taking it all in. And I'm picking up trash as I go, because I feel like when I'm in places like that, I feel like I should, right? So, beer can here, a Coke can there. I'm just picking it up. And I look around and suddenly I notice those car seats aren't anywhere to be found. They're nowhere there. And I called John over. I said, John, come here. I said, where are those car seats? And John's eyes got real big and he's looking around. He's like, I don't see them anywhere. I was like, yeah, they're not here. So we called our host over and I said, hey, man, where are those car seats? And he's like, oh, I'm sure they just blew over in the wind. The wind was howling when we saw them. They would have blown over then.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what? And I said, we should still be able to, even if they blew over, we should still be able to find them. No one was back there cleaning up. Like, trust me, there was enough around for me to clean up. No one was back there that just, decided to clean up. And then I asked everybody what they saw. And Lucinda says, oh yeah, that guy, he looked like some hippie from Northern California. And he had those sunglasses on. He thought he was Joe Cool. And John says, what are you talking about sunglasses? I looked the guy right in the eyes. He wasn't wearing sunglasses. And then one of the hosts says, oh, he looked Hispanic. So now we can't even agree. Other than the staff and the hood and the pack, we can't agree what this guy looked like. Again, I thought he didn't necessarily look like me, but he had my facial hair, and I saw a white guy for sure. And now I'm like, okay, this is really bizarre. Like, we should be able to agree what this guy looked like. We were all shocked. We all agreed he shouldn't be there. We were all like kind of worried about it because, we're hanging out there. Who is this guy? No one can agree on what he looked like exactly. And I think... this sounds bat-scat crazy, I know, but I think it has something to do with that car seat, quote-unquote car seat, because the way I jumped when I looked at it, I think this thing shapeshifted into that. I don't know. There's a story in one of where the footprints end about a kid who's hunting, and he's watching a Bigfoot through a scope. He's just using the scope to look at it. He has no intention to shoot it, but he's observing it. And he sees these 2 other hunters kind of coming down the hill towards it, and he watches it turn into a tree. And these 2 hunters walk by it, and he says one of them looks at the thing and jumps, and then it kind of settles, and then keeps walking. Like, he recognized something was weird about it, but then just, oh, it's a tree, and keeps walking. I mean, did something like that happen? It's very odd. So, and the fact that she said, you kind of look like Bigfoot, and I said, oh, he's kind of got my beard.
I know.
It just, the whole thing was just it was so weird. I truly believe like there was some kind of shapeshifter or something. I mean, and I think pretty much everyone there except the skeptic, John and everybody's like, yeah, there was some kind of shapeshifter. We saw like something. Was it Bigfoot? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it wasn't your doppelganger, but you just recognize these similarities.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like Bigfoot reports, often people will say, oh, he looked, I thought somebody was wearing a hoodie. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, that's because they have peaked heads, the flesh and blood people. And then other things say, oh, I thought it was somebody wearing sunglasses because their eyes are so big. So the fact that it was actually someone wearing an actual hoodie, and one of us at least thought he was wearing sunglasses is pretty interesting as far as these sort of Bigfoot traits.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you're looking again at this classic tarot depiction of the hermit, he's got the hood.
Yeah, and the stick.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I do think that there is this spirituality part of not just Bigfoot, but since we're talking about Bigfoot, mm-hmm. And I think that when I mean spirituality, I don't mean religion. I mean like, the connection to the human spirit or the soul or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And drawing from the collective unconsciousness. And I think that even if they don't recognize it, I think flesh and blood people have that aspect to it too. Mm-hmm. I think there's like this yearning for like discovery and mystery. And
yeah, I think it speaks to a real part of us. And I am hard on flesh and blood people because they're hard on me. Mm-hmm. But again, I have sympathy for their beliefs. And I do think we are in many ways doing many of the same things. And in that we are, in a sense, kind of finding a spirit in nature and trying to commune with nature. And again, whether they consciously recognize that or not, I do think we have that in common.
Yeah. So what keeps you interested in Bigfoot after all this research?
Oh, it's just the whole thing. Yeah, I try to get away from it and it'll draw me back in. I just find it so fascinating. I think because again, as a child, I spent so much time in the woods, never really had anything particularly strange happen. But then I get interested in this stuff and I start recognizing things and I have these wonderful experiences. Most of them synchronicities. Most of them weren't like bad smells or anything like that, but a lot of these wonderful synchronicities in the woods. And I start looking at the woods as sort of a spiritual place, you know? And I think that it becomes part of that. And not just Bigfoot, but whatever these other entities are as well, you know? I think it's very easy in the paranormal world. And again, it happens, like, is another example is interdimensional or something. People come up with the word quantum for a while. Quantum was a big one. It's like, no one understands quantum physics. Stop it. You know, for a while it was jinn. Oh, jinn. It's all jinn. And it explains it. Well, it doesn't really explain anything. You just gave it a different name, right?
Yeah.
Interdimensional doesn't really explain anything. You just give it a different name. So I think being careful about saying all this stuff. But I do think even biblically, like Jesus told people to go to the wilderness to pray. Go there. There's examples time after time of people going to these places and recognizing that it's somewhere else and somewhere special. And I think that it's a big part of that for me as a hiker, as someone who just loves to be out in the woods, to also have, look, I love bird watching. I love all the natural things. I melt when I see a rabbit or a toad. You know, I love natural animals. But to have that other layer, that there's more yet. And again, I know it. You know, I feel like I've experienced it. There's no question to me that there's this other layer, this spiritual layer beyond, you know, you have this physical nature. And then there's this other layer that kind of sits there too, along with it. It's all about that for me. It's absolutely fascinating.
Agreed. And with these symbols and stuff, yeah, there's a part of nature. I mean, nature is very fun to enjoy with people too, but there is something about if you want to reach like a deeper level, it's like solitude is kind of necessary to some degree. Maybe not forever, but
Some of my favorite moments and most peaceful moments are just being alone. I have MS. I really probably shouldn't hike the hikes I do by myself. It could be a problem because I get in places with no cell reception and I get into pretty sketchy situations. But I'm fine. I've been fine so far, and I'm going with that. But I get so much peace out there, and I love hiking with friends. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It's great. But I love hiking alone. There's something about it it just fills up my soul, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love being out there by myself.
Yeah. And I have these little, like, I haven't had any overt kind of experiences in the woods, but I have little magical experiences all the time, like seeing a giant silk moth and just things like that, or a deer. And there's this line in a Smith song, Ask, and Morrissey says, nature is a language can't you read? And I just really resonate with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does come up with some good lines despite himself.
I know, the little brat. So I'm finally into Bigfoot. It took me a while, but I'm here.
But I think a lot of people are kind of the same way with you. I've met a lot of people who've told me similar things. Like because to them it's like, oh, if it's just a gorilla, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it either exists or it doesn't, whatever. But when you start getting into the mystery and really getting into how odd it is, I think that people start going, oh, there's more to this. So I don't know if the Bigfoot world is 50-50 flesh and blood and otherwise at this point. I really have no idea. But it seems like at least the people I talk to, a lot of people are coming around to maybe not all the way where I am, but at least to saying like, yeah, there's something really weird about this, you know, which is all I ask. Just recognize the weirdness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate all your research and your perspective. So the next big monster I have yet to get into, which I feel like I can get there now, but is Nessie. I've never really been interested in Nessie. I don't know if it's because I'm landlocked. Are you a Nessie person?
Not terribly. I'm not a, I've started to get into sort of water beings a little bit.
Okay.
But for a while. And I love swimming. Again, I can't swim in the creeks this year because of runoff and the E. coli and stuff in the creeks. It tears me up. Every year I just swim in the creeks. I didn't have to have a swimming pool. But can't do it this year because it's dangerous. Despite that, you'd think I'd have been into like the sort of water fairies and stuff, but it's just sort of getting there for me. There's a fabulous book about the Loch Ness Monster, and I'm not going to remember the name now, but it gets into the whole weird side of it. Like, you know, Crowley had a house on the shores of Loch Ness. And a lot of people kind of think that, he may have summoned something, because a lot of the Nessie sightings start happening after that.
Oh.
So there is some interesting things with Nessie, but yeah, I've not gotten too deeply into it.
Okay. All right. So you can't sell me on her yet, but
Not yet.
all right. Well, thank you for talking about Bigfoot and helping me get this interest, which I'm pretty hooked now. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. So happy to do it, and thank you for having me talk. I'll babble on about Bigfoot for another 2 hours if you let me.
cool. Yeah. Well, we'll come back, and I think we might have to talk about fairies in the future too.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim.
Thanks for having me back.
All right. Lots to go over there. First, of course, another thank you to Tim for coming on and doing this very extensive interview and sharing his thoughts and his personal experiences. If you're new to him and you enjoyed his ideas and perspective, as far as the listening format goes, you can check out his podcast, Strange Familiars, where he interviews people about their personal experiences in their own words, which is pretty cool. Not all of them are Bigfoot, but of course, it's very exciting for Tim when they are. And then, yeah, as far as the reading formats, he has several books on Bigfoot and other topics like hermits and local folklore and urban legend in Pennsylvania. But the big one that really I drew from for this interview is Where the Footprints End, which is co-authored by Joshua Cutchin. And it's 2 volumes of just really fascinating stuff. There's something about Bigfoot and adjacent creatures that really captures us, humans, and resonates with us. I think it's our tie to nature and primal wildness, as Tim says, that we've really lost for the most part. To me, there's a complex psychology behind the human emotions surrounding nature. It represents the deep, dark, untamed aspect of the psyche. Some seek it out, and others turn away. At some point in our life, though, everyone must walk through the dark wood and face those deep, dark, challenging emotions. And when we come out the other side, we are changed. Experience grants wisdom, and wisdom adds layers of greater meaning to life. So, it is all worth it in the end, those dark, untamed passages through the woods, but I understand how it can be daunting, and it's usually rough going in the moment. So, please let me know what you think about Bigfoot, wild men, hermits, archetypes, anything we've talked about. And if you've seen Bigfoot, you've got to let Tim or I know. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this very long episode. I'll be back very soon with more strange stories and concepts. So until next time, take care and good night.